Hello, this is Will Faber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a second submission by Roxana and her horse Becks. Now, the last time we saw Becks, she really wasn't extending very well and getting its neck out in front of her. And she went back and spent a lot of time in the walk and really has paid off because now we're really beginning to see this horse really beginning to stretch out. Now, you could say, yes, we'd like to see a little more activity in the walk now at this point, and that's what you do. Go as slow as you need to get the stretch happening and then build upon that. Now, right here in the lunge, one thing I would say here is let your left hand lower a bit so you're not holding it up in the air, and try to keep the slack out of the rein and keep yourself back a little bit. You're a little bit too far forward on the horse's eye. If you see, like right there, you're almost getting ahead of the horse's eye. So I'd like to see, if I'm looking at you from this angle, I'd like to see you sort of positioned in the middle of the horse's body. So you're behind the eye and able to send the horse on and forward ahead of your whip there. But this is coming really nice. Once again, it's really paid off that you've taken the time to slow this down. Now we can see that, she still has a way to go, but her back is not looking bad at all. The neck looks beautiful. We can see she still has a little belly hanging down there. She hasn't quite started to really engage up. I'm sure she will as we move on in this workout. But that's what we're looking for. So right now, the biggest thing is just beginning to ask for more and more walk. See, once again here, you're starting to get too far forward on the horse's eye. It's also better to try to make yourself work in a circle. To remember that on a circle you can get the step more consistently around you, whereas because here you have not really enough contact. And I might suggest that you actually get a shorter lunge line. I actually cut quite a bit off of lunge lines when I get them because I want to have about 10 feet, maybe or so more than if the horse is out on a 20-meter circle. So I'd have a little extra, but I don't want to be carrying so much line in my hand. All from the standpoint of, as well, that it can be quite dangerous. It's something, if you're working with a really fractious horse and you've got all this line wrapped around your hand and arms, which can end up getting wrapped around your legs and things like that. So it's, I try to work with just the amount of line that I need. And unfortunately, many lines come longer than they need to be. So think about that and try to get a little more working on a circle here. Once again, keeping the horse, see how you're starting to move up on the horse's head there. Instead, what you need to do is step at that point towards the hindquarters and maybe give her a little touch with the whip there. Remember, the places that we want to touch the horse with the whip are in that fleshy part of the buttocks there, well above the hocks there where you're touching the horse always in flesh and never on bone. It's starting to get a little better, but once again, see how you're moving too far forward on the horse? So what you should be doing at that point is stepping more towards the hindquarters and sending them out and staying in the middle of the horse so you can send her around you a little bit. And I'd like to see you take up the slack in that line. You see, you have so much line there that she's not really going around. She's not really going to the end of the line and staying there, which is what we'd like to do, is to limit the length of that rein. So I'd love to see you take up the slack in that. And as I said, it might be a good idea to get rid of some of that lunge line, cut off some of it so that you don't have so much to deal with wrapped around your hand. But this is a very beautiful horse. I really look forward to it. He looks so much better than I did in the last video that I saw. The neck is really starting. Now, this is obviously getting too slow here again. But see, once again, see how she starts to slow down and you move forward on her eye and just let her drift to wherever you want to go. So if you could try to keep yourself centered in the middle of the arena. Now, some people will get the erroneous idea that, that circles are really hard on horses. Well, they are really hard on horses if you're running them around like a lunatic on a 10-meter circle for a long period of time. But a 20-meter circle at a walk is not going to hurt the horse. And they certainly should be capable of doing that. And if you have to this is a pretty big horse, so if you have to widen that out to a 30-meter circle when you trot or something like that, but that's fine. But just always remember that the point of the circle is that many people have destroyed their horses, lunging for way too long a period of time, and of course running them like lunatics to wear them out. And of course that never really works because the more you do that, the longer it takes to wear them out. And then you end up destroying the horse's legs in the process, which I believe is why, some people got the idea that, lunging horses is a bad idea because it could be hard on the legs. And once again, that's also true whether you're riding them or whatever else you're doing. If you're overworking them and they're hollow over their backs, you're going to be destroying them in the process. So I like that. See right there where you get the slack out of the line a little bit and get her going around you in a little circle. So I tend to not go in straight lines until I get the horse really nice and consistent. Then I start going in straight lines. The circle really helps us to keep that inside hind leg engaging and pushing up into the back. So trying to make your circle a little bit rounder, a little more active. It's coming very nicely. You come a long way from what it was. It just still needs to get a little bit more. So you've got the stretch happening now. Begin to add a little more action to that, if you will. In other words, a little more active step of the leg underneath the body, and consistent. So we're always looking for a consistent rhythm here. You know, right there too, trying to restart the horse there, you're a little bit too far forward up on the eye. See where you are there? You want to be back a little bit. And then you'd want to touch her maybe with a little more strength when you touch her a little bit more. I mean, there's nothing wrong. We have to get a response from the horse. Now, I would never tell you, you know, if a horse just doesn't want to move and you're beating it, that's never what I'm talking about. But, you know, sometimes with this horse, I'd just like to see you, I think if you touched it a little bit more actively with a little more intensity, you'd get a little more out of her. Because they get used to whatever. In other words, it's just like cracking a whip. If you crack it and crack it and crack it, some horses will go crazy and others will just simply go to sleep, and you'll never get them to do anything once they realize the crack doesn't do anything. But cracking whips is never a good idea, as it tends to annoy anybody that's near you, and we never want to try to terrorize the horse with a whip. As I said, you know, if you have to do that to get a horse to move, there's probably something wrong with the horse, is what I would suggest, and you need to just stay in the walk and gradually figure out what that is. So this is starting pretty good. Some of the trot work here starts to get there a little bit. But kind of like the walk work, you're going to need a little more activity there. She starts to go down. So when you get that starting to happen, I'd really like to see you stay in one place a little more. So you're starting to get a little bit of stretch down, but not enough push from the back end to send her forward. She's neck is kind of down in front, but she's more pulling with her shoulders. If you see, that's why you get that sort of labored feeling about it as she kind of stabs her front legs and drags herself along a little bit. So all that's missing there is just trying to make her a little more active. Like that starts to get a little better. But you know, you had a horse that was difficult to stretch to begin with, so you've done a good job with that, getting it to this point. So once again, I'd like to see you take that slack out of the lines. You've just got a little bit too much slack all the time. I don't want to just like when we ride, I don't want to be pulling against the mouth of the horse, but I want there to be no slack in the rein so that, you know, I can communicate with the horse very quickly if I need to. If we have a slack in the line, we've got to always take up that slack before we can ask the horse to do something. So once again, the big add-on here is we just need to get this a lot more active than what you've got there. But it will come. Now that's starting to look a little better in this phase here. There she goes, starts to step a little better. Now that's starting to look like something there. She starts to take a little bigger step. And don't be afraid in the walk that she's going to go up into the trot. If she does, just bring her back to the walk again, if that's not what you're asking for. But there the stretch looks a little better. She gets a little more active, start to see a little bit of push from her back. From her back end, that is. And she gives her some canter. It's not a terrible canter. Not fully over her back, but it's not disunited or anything like that. So not bad, not something that you shouldn't do. A little bit of this may help her get a little impulsion. And that would be what I would want, something like that, just a couple of circles around. You can see how when she came back to the trot there, how she kind of split in half, that her back kind of caved in, and she was moving in two parts there for a moment, so she started moving a little better as you got around the circle. And that starts to look a little better there. Now that's starting to look a little bit like something right there. Now I'm starting to see a little more step out behind. Still needs to be a little more than it is, but that's coming better. Now I see you're working in a halter here, which is fine as long as the horse isn't dragging you around anywhere. You might want to consider beginning to go to work her off her bridle at some point. But as long as she's not trying to drag you around or you're having difficulty controlling her, then you're fine just working in the halter. If you can get enough energy out of her to start getting her moving without needing more control. What a beautiful horse this is going to be, though, once you get all the parts together. The walk there is a little better. So it still needs to be, 50% more than what you're getting here, but it's coming. And sometimes with horses, we have to go very slowly in the beginning just to get them to understand the stretch. But then we have to start making it active enough. The stretch alone, just getting a horse to put his nose on the ground, does not necessarily going to mean that they're coming through behind. We see in most Western riders do the peanut rolling thing where we see their noses on the ground, but their hind ends are out behind them. So the stretch only facilitates this happening. So I like to say when the stretch comes from the back end, then it's more consistent. So when I try to work a horse in hand, for instance, I'm trying to activate that back end. I get the stretch to come from that, not from just trying to force the horse's head down or whatever the case may be. But once we get it, we just always know that we have to begin to ask for more, which is what we hear. And once again, you see how far forward you are? You're almost level with the horse's eye. So you're going to have a tendency to slow down when you do that. So when you get back there, see now you're starting to be more in the position that you need to be like that, where you're in the middle of the horse. And with a horse like this, you always, that's at this level where you feel like she's just a little bit lethargic a little bit. We have to be close enough to be able to use the whip when we need it until they begin to develop more energy. Now this time the trot is a little better here. There we go. Now it's starting to swing a little bit. So just before that cut, that was starting to look quite a bit better. And that's just the point there. You see how you needed to get behind the horse's eye again. Once again, stay back there. And again, taking up the slack. Look at how much slack there is in your line there. So you want to take that slack out of the line. So there's just an unbroken line. I don't want you to have contact against it unless you need to give and take a little bit, to get the horse to soften a little bit. But it's never a constant pull at any time, just like it's never a constant leg. I don't know why people find it hard to understand that if you're constantly kicking a horse or you're constantly pulling on its mouth or holding against its mouth, it's going to go dead in the mouth and it's going to go dead to the sides. So we see so many horses that are trained that way these days that are just used to people constantly aggravating them with their legs and holding against their hands at the same time, which is why so many horses check out. Because they're always being punished. That's what we have to remember, what punishment is, especially if you're trying to force the horse into some frame while you're doing both of those things, that is kicking and pulling at the same time. It never leads to much. You might be able to get by riding that way, as we see many people doing this these days for a while, but it's always the horse that's going to suffer. That is, unless the horse flips over on you, which is also what's causing so many accidents in jumping world, is people hanging on the mouths of horses. Horses start to fall. The people don't let go, and the back end comes over on top of them. And that's something you never want to experience. And it's very interesting today because that's what we have most people getting killed from, is rotational falls. And I've seen horses do rotational falls just at a trot, trotting around a ring. They cross their legs over and down they go if the person hangs onto the mouth. Now this is a little better now. Now we see a little more swing. I'm starting to see a little more push through the back. So it's a little better in this direction. The circle is a little rounder. This is probably her more comfortable side. Still needs to be a little more than it was, but I like how you're back behind the eye right now. Just take up that slack in the rein like that. Now it's probably time at this point to try to begin to keep your walk going a little bit longer, or your trot rather. So you try to sustain it once you get that, build on a little bit, and then bring her back to the walk. So I certainly don't see any problems with this horse isn't excited or anything like that. So, I think you have a bit more that you can ask for. Good, that's a better trot in this position. Now it's starting to be a little bit more active. Try to maintain that position so that you're behind the eye, but this is better. She's obviously a little easier to work in this direction. Now that's starting to get a little more active there. That may be just that you're asking her for the canter. And once again, the canter here is good enough that you can do a little bit of it. Interestingly enough, it's a little stiffer in this direction than it was in the other direction. But it's not so hollow that I would say don't do it at all. If it gives you a little impulsion, which it seemed to do that time, gave you a little energy in the horse, that's okay. Just don't do it for a very long period of time. A circle or two around is all you need. Now that's looking much better. That looks much better. Now we still see there's not quite enough push in that back legs, but it's way better than it was. That's the best little segment that we've seen since the beginning of this. So try to think of making things progressive in your workout. So the next time, when you're asking her to sustain the trot, sustain it a little bit longer, 30 seconds longer or a minute longer the next time. So we begin to develop some fitness as well. As we can see here that, while this is going really quite well, but her belly is still kind of hanging down, we're not quite getting enough action to really begin to get her to begin to lift that back and begin to really engage. Better than it was when we started there. I saw a little bit pull up right there, actually. And that's a little better trot now. Yes. Well, in fact, see how the flank did pull up a little bit right there. Now she's still a little flat-footed behind. I want to see more push off the ground, but that's, once again, better. There you go, like that. Still needs quite a bit more than what you're getting, but that's a good start. So once again, let's reiterate the biggest things. I said I would shorten that lunge line if I were you so you're not dealing with it. Try not to hold your left hand or the hand with the line in it up in the air all the time. Let it be more down to your side there. And once again, if you didn't have so much extra lunge line, you wouldn't have so much wrapped around your hand there. Just something to think about to make it a little easier for yourself. And this idea of staying in the middle of the horse so you're not stepping up. She tends to slow down and you tend to step forward closer to her eye, in front of the eye rather, and that tends to slow her down even more. So especially as she slows down. Now I like how you have the contact there. See how you're keeping the slack out of the line. That's what we're looking for, like that. And she goes off to a better trot there. And actually her belly is pulled up there. I'm looking at that a little bit. She's actually come up a little bit. So that's what we're looking for. So you're headed in the right direction here. Can still be a little more than it is, and obviously she travels a little easier in this direction than she did in the other direction. There, that's better. So that's starting to be really very nice there. They're starting to get something there. Now this is the best we've seen. She's actually starting to push a little more with her hind legs. And watch as she does that, how the shoulder begins to start moving more freely. We don't feel that stabbingness in the front end. So great job here. You've come a long way. See, once again here, you let yourself get a little bit too far out in front of her eye, and then she wants to turn into you. So keep watching. Keep your eyes on the hindquarters of the horse and not the front end. I'm always looking at the back end to see what it's doing and where I am in relationship to that. So great job here. You've done a great job of improving her. I look forward to seeing you again in the not too distant future. Keep making her a little more active and just trying to get a little more push, but you're well on your way. See you next time.